A balanced slate is coming. Games Workshop's next data slate is around the corner, and the whole scene is guessing what gets touched. Here's the thing. Most of those guesses are vibes. This one isn't. We're going to use the archive's own tournament data to reason about which overperformers are structurally exposed to a nerf, which units carry them, and what the underperformers are missing. And because the whole point of this channel is honesty, everything here is a prediction, labeled as 1. We'll come back when the real slate lands and grade every call. Stay to the end for the board. This is the Infinite Archive, a data-grounded prediction special. First, the method, because it's a feature, not a limitation. The archive has no theorycraft model of unit strength. We read strength from what actually wins, how often a data sheet shows up across a faction's lists, how much it costs, and whether the games with it in the list win more than the games without it. This edition we decoded 600 tournament lists and joined 94% of singles games to the list that played them. 2 caveats, said out loud. 11th edition is young, so every number here is thin, and the confidence is deliberately low. And a unit's win correlation only tells you something when both samples are real. If 90% of a faction runs a unit, the without it group is a handful of lists, and the signal is noise. Read the prevalence there, not the delta. Start with the overperformers. These are the 5 factions in the Strength Index's stronger band, a composite of win rate, top cut conversion, blowout margin, and consistency, scored across the whole roster. Thousand Sons lead at plus 1.6, then Orcs, Emperor's Children, Grey Knights, and Chaos Demons. Every one of them clears on more than one facet, so none is a one-week fluke. And note the discipline. Imperial agents would slot in 3rd, but on 20 games we hold them at average. We don't call a faction strong on a sample that thin. Let's take the 5 that qualify one at a time, and find the load-bearing units the data points at. Thousand Sons. Number 1 in the index at plus 1.6, 60% win rate over 234 games. Look at the facets. Strong on win rate, top cut, and blowout. Only consistency negative. That's a feast or famine army. It wins big or it loses. The volume carry is the Hex Warp Thrall Band detachment, 58% across 43% of the faction's games. But here's the wrinkle worth a nerf. A second detachment, the Sekitar cohort, that 11th edition lists, pair with Hex Warp. It's almost never the primary, so a naive count says 29 games, but track everywhere it's actually fielded, and it's in 85 games at 71% win rate, plus 14 victory points. That pairing is the real engine. Now the units. This is where the correlation earns its keep. Rubric Marines are in 93% of lists, and the games with them win 20 points more than the games without. Sekitar Robots, 67% of lists, and a plus 25-point swing, the sharpest in the faction. Scarab Occult Terminators are the expensive ubiquitous headline at 370 points. So if the slate touches Thousand Sons, the data doesn't point at the obvious Scarab Occult. It points at the Sekitar package and Rubric Marines. That's the structurally exposed core. Orcs. Number 2, plus 1.3, 59% over 205 games. The same high win rate, high blowout, low consistency shape. The carry is Green Tide, 66% win rate, the strongest high volume detachment on the whole board. That's a detachment rule nerf candidate before you even look at units. And the units confirm it. A horde of boys in 81% of lists, with a plus 24-point win correlation. Kazkul and a Warboss ride along. But here's what the broad data catches that a top 3 list view can't. The Beast Snag-a-Build actually underperforms. Lists with Beast Snag-a-Boys win 20 points less. So the winning Orc army isn't the truck boy speed build the internet talks about. It's the Green Tide foot horde. If the slate hits orcs, it's green tide and boys, not beast snagas. Emperor's Children, plus 0.97, 57.5% over 245 games. The highest variance army in the band. Consistency minus 1.2. Now, this is the faction where the correlation goes quiet, and it's important to say why. Their staples, Tormentors, Infractors, the Lord Exultant, are in 90 to 100% of lists. When almost everyone runs a unit, the without it group is 2 or 3 lists, so the delta is meaningless. For Emperor's Children, the story is prevalence and points, not correlation. And the unit that fits the classic nerf shape is the Defiler, 310 points, in 87% of lists. Here's the kicker. That same Defiler anchors Thousand Suns and World Eaters list too. It's a shared chaos datasheet, which means a points bump to one model would ripple across several factions at once. Hold that thought, because it's the theme of the next segment. Grey Knights are the odd one out, and the most interesting. Their raw win rate is only modestly above even. But their top cut conversion is plus 1.8, the highest in the game. They lose fair games and then win the ones that put you on the top tables. That's a conversion story, not a detachment story. No single build carries them. Where the correlation does bite is the elite core. The Grand Master in Nemesis Dread Knight and the Purifier squads both correlate with winning, plus 8 to plus 13 points, and Castellan Crow with them. The catch, Grey Knights are thin, 136 games, and some of those unit splits are under 30. So the Dread Knight and Purifier package is the exposed core, but I'd hold that call more loosely than the Thousand Suns one. Chaos Demons round out the band, and they're the clearest case of the data correcting me. If you looked at the top finishing lists, you'd say, Nerf the big, greater demons. Lord of Change, Great Unclean One, 300 points each, all over the winning lists. But run the correlation across every list, and those greater demons don't correlate with winning at all. The Lord of Change games are 13 points worse, not better. Demons are genuinely strong, but their strength is diffuse. Every build works a little. No single datasheet is the engine. So my honest call here is that there's no clean nerf target, which is exactly the kind of thing the broad data is for. It talks you off the obvious pick. Now step back. Before you conclude these are 5 separate strong factions, ask whether one thing is lifting several of them, because that changes what a rational slate would touch. 3 things to look at. 1. Psychic weapons. And here I want to be careful. Thousand Suns and Grey Knights are the 2 most psyker-saturated factions, and both are strong. It's tempting to call that a rule, but it isn't a clean one. Tyranids and Aeldari also field plenty of psychic weapons, and they sit average and weaker. So having psychic tools clearly doesn't make you strong on its own. This is a factor to watch, not a change I'm telling anyone to make. Where it might matter, in 10th edition the psyker keyword was almost pure downside. A stack of units and rules had protections against psychic attacks, and little rewarded you for it. 11th's new psychic weapons give the keyword an upside. For Grey Knights especially, a faction that was one of the worst in 10th, and now leads the top cut. That shift, plus being able to shape their own mission structure, may be a real part of the turnaround, but I'd file it under watch, not nerf. 2. The Defiler, that 310-point vehicle, anchoring Emperor's Children, Thousand Suns, and World Eaters. 1 point's change there, 3 rosters affected. 3. The second detachment trick. Thousand Suns pairing Sekitar cohort under the hood. The lesson from those last 2, where a single change touches several factions at once. A shared data sheet, a detachment rule. It has outsized effect, and that's what a smart slate reaches for. The psychic pattern I'd only watch. And to be clear, all of this is inference about cause, not something the win rates prove. No rules text on screen, just the pattern and our read of it. A quick structural footnote before we cross to the underperformers, because it sits in the same systemic column. The missions themselves aren't equal. 11th edition has each player pick a force disposition, and 88% of games declare one, so we can measure them. Priority Assets wins at 52.5%, the strongest of the 5, and yet it's picked only 17% of the time. Meanwhile, Disruption and Reconnaissance, the 2 least picked, are also the 2 that drag, both under 49%. So there's a real spread. One underused mission is quietly the best, and 2 of the rare ones are traps. Whether that's intended design or a balance artifact, we genuinely don't know, but it's an edge sitting on the table for anyone paying attention. Now the other end. These are the factions the conditions for a buff exist for. The weaker band, Z below -0.5, with enough games to be real. We'll take the 4 with the clearest stories and the deepest samples. Chaos Knights at the bottom, then World Eaters, Eldari, and Astra Militarum. For each, the buff question isn't just low win rate. It's the gap between what wins and what the faction actually brings. And the same correlation tool tells us which of their own units are dragging. Chaos Knights. Dead last, -1.5, 36%. And look at the facets. Negative on every single one. This isn't one bad unit. The whole faction underdelivers. Nothing in it clears 42% win rate. But the correlation still finds a shape. The small war dogs, the Stalker and Carnivore, are the only things that correlate with their wins, plus 15 to 18 points. The big centerpiece knights, like the Abominant at 355 points, actively drag -13. So the structural read is that Chaos Knight's expensive namesake models don't earn their points, and that's where a buff would have to land. The conditions for a broad buff exist. This is a faction leaning on its cheapest units to stay afloat. World Eaters are the most structurally interesting underperformer, because the faction is split against itself. 40% overall, but the Berserker Warband, the Melee Core, 44% of all their games, wins only 36. The only thing keeping them off the floor is the vehicle build, Brazen Engines, at 46. And the correlation is brutal about the cause. The Exalted 8-bound, their signature elite, in 70% of lists, correlate with losing by 23 points. Khorne Berserkers, -9. The units the faction is literally named for are the ones dragging it down. So the buff pressure here is precise. It's not the whole book. It's the Khorne melee infantry identity. A faction that only wins when it stops playing the way it's designed to play is exactly the profile a buff is meant to fix. Eldari have the strangest profile on the board. Look at the facets. Consistency is +1.9. They almost never get blown out. But win rate and blowout are both deeply negative. In plain terms, Eldari lose steadily. They're not unlucky. They're reliably a step short. That points at an efficiency problem. The army does what it wants and still loses by a bit, rather than the feast or famine variance you see up top. And the correlation says the wins they do get lean on mobility and objective play. Rangers and Warp Spiders correlate positively, while the Psyker Cavalry, the Warlock Skyrunners, correlate with losing. So a buff to Eldari isn't about a broken unit. It's about closing a small, consistent efficiency gap across the book. And Astra Militarum, 38%, and the defining facet is blowout, -1.3. This is an army that doesn't just lose, it gets tabled. Whole detachments like Bridgehead Strike posting a 17% win rate and -20 victory points a game. The correlation adds a twist. The characters carry, the Lord Solar and Scout Sentinels correlate with wins, but the Cadian Shock Troops, the basic infantry, correlate with losing by 10. A guard army whose troops drag and whose survival depends on its characters is telling you the gap is resilience. The buff pressure is on durability, and on making the infantry core worth its points, which, for the faction that's supposed to be endless infantry, is about as structural as a gap gets. So here's the board. Every call, one screen. On the nerf side, 1,000 Suns, and specifically the Sekitar and Rubric Marines core, the best supported call we've got. Orcs, Green Tide, and Boys. Emperor's Children, the Defiler, on prevalence and points. Grey Knights, the Dread Knight and Purifier package, but thin. Chaos Demons, honestly, no clean target. And the Systemic Call, the highest leverage one, a psychic weapon or shared defiler change that touches several at once. On the buff side, Chaos Knight's big namesake knights, World Eater's Khorne melee core, Eldari's efficiency, and Astra Militarum's durability. Every one of these is an inference, not a measurement. And the confidence is low by construction. It's a young addition, but they're written down now, in public, with the data behind them. Let me close where the channel always closes. This entire episode is a prediction. The editors read, not the archive's measurement, and the two are kept separate on purpose. The measurements are the win rates and the correlations. The calls about what Games Workshop will do are opinion on top of them. Where I'm most confident that 1,000 Suns and Orcs are genuinely overperforming, and we found their carry units, that World Eater's melee identity is structurally broken, and that a systemic lever beats nerfing 5 factions one at a time. Where I'm holding back, every specific unit call, because the edition is young, the Grey Knights and underperformer splits, several of which are under 30 games, and the Psychic Cause story, which is an inference about why, not a proven fact. So write it down with us. When the real slate drops, we come back, we put this board up again, and we grade every call, the hits, the misses, and the ones we hedged. That accountability is the whole point. Data is infinite. Understanding it is divine. The tier list, the data, and the tools are all live at infinitearchive.org. We'll see you when the slate drops.